Okay, in this lecture I want to just give you some tips for how to get the most out of this course and some in general as well. So the first thing I want to tell you is that this is technical action. I really encourage Excel open anytime that you watch, and what you should do is go to a lecture, listen to a little bit, and then pop back over to Excel, practice to the watch a little bit more. And that will really help you to learn these skills best into practice. The next thing I want to talk to you about is the self. So here I am in a lecture. This is the count a blank function lecture. There are a couple of things that you can do to get better experience out of Udemy. One of them is that you can go full screen. I usually zoom a lot so that there's nothing that's going to be hard to see, a smaller screen, but full screen will stop ability out of it. So you can go full screen, or you can do that and go back to the regular screen. Another important thing is that if you have a slower computer and things are bogging down a lot, you can change the quality to a lower quality so that it will play better. Other than you have that quality that you can, and this is already set on 720p, and that's how I record these videos. You have the volume control here. As far as volume, I try to so that there's plenty to listen to them with background noise, but if you have the volume turned all the way up on your computer, check volume control because you may be able to turn one up as well. Okay. Now then, skip forward in the lecture 15 seconds if I'm talking about something that you're already familiar with and you need it, or you can jump back 15 seconds if you didn't understand something. And my favorite feature is right here. So this is speed control. Sometimes it's a little fast, but sometimes I'll talk slower so that you can understand what I explain, especially if it's a more difficult subject. But for some people, you don't need it to slower. In most of the courses that I watch on Udemy, I watch at one speed. Sometimes if it's or something I'm already familiar with, or just somebody talking really slow, I'll go at 2 times the speed. I've found that you can listen to me at about 1.25 to 1.5 times the speed, and you'll still full. So that's worth trying out. But the beauty of this is that if you can comprehend everything 5 times the speed, then you can get through this course in a time and still get the value out of it. And that brings me to my third point. Repetition is very important to learn. You're learning a lot of new concepts, and a lot of them are actually fairly complex, too challenging to put into practice. But I'm going to make it very easy, very step by step, and I'm going to walk you through it. The best favor that you can do yourself in learning Excel is go through lecture, play around with it as you go, jumping back and forth through Excel and working back to the video, but then go through these videos a couple of times. You don't have to go the whole course a couple of times, but if something you're struggling with, say VLOOKUP, and you're having a little bit of trouble getting the concept perfect, try and create the best one you can. Start VLOOKUP function, create a pivot table, and then if it's out, then you go back and watch the video, and I guarantee you up at least a couple of things that you didn't catch the time around, and it will help you to cement your learning. Another thing is that I tend to add little as I'm talking about something, tips and tricks and things that you can use every day. And the first time through, you won't catch most of those because you'll be focusing on the main subject. Second time through, pick up some of those subtle things. You know, it might just be a little keystroke or a way to something like that, but it can really help you overall, and you can really get a lot out of that. The final thing is the layout over to the side here. But if you are a beginner, you want to follow through this course chronologically because it's designed to build on itself, so each lesson you learn will apply to, and it'll make it much easier for you to learn all of the concepts. If you're not a beginner, if you use Excel in your work and you really just need to learn how to make charts or pivot tables or whatever, then you can really skip down ways here, past the kitchen remodel worksheet section, and go to the functions sections, the 7 most popular Excel functions, and into creating charts and pivot tables and pivot charts. So that's where you're going to start if you already have a lot of experience. And then finally, I want to show you where the downloads are. And this has changed recently. And so if you go over here, this is the new interface. You'll see all the lectures over here under course content. And these particular lectures don't have any downloads associated with them. Down to a section that does. We'll go into 7. You'll notice right next to all the lectures that have rectangle the resource. And if you click that drop down, then it'll give you this option here to the resource. And a lot of times it will just download it. If you're lucky, it will ask you what you want to do with it. And this says open, and I can go to Excel and open this right into Excel. And bring up Excel, and it'll bring you right into one thing to keep in mind is you'll have to go click enable editing because it's going to add downloads that you might get from. But you click enable editing, and then you can start right here in Excel. And a quick tip for PCs between windows, you can tab, and then when you release, it'll go to the last window that you were in. So that'll bring you back to the course. You can click keep watching. Then when you want to go back to Excel again, you hit Alt again. Pull through these like this by hitting Tab multiple times to Excel right here. I'll work the most out of this course. I'm so excited that you're here. And see you in the next lecture. Okay, in this section we're going to be talking about how to create charts and graphs in Excel. This first lecture I'm just going to show you some of the possibilities with charts and graph lectures. Walk through creating your the left-hand corner of this spreadsheet. You'll recognize our kitchen remodel cost. Is that I've taken the grid lines out of our worksheet just to make our spreadsheet and charts easier to look at. And by the way that you do that is just by going to View, and see they pop back up, or I can click grid lines and they go. So what I've done is created these 3 charts based on, you can see this first one here is basically just the cost of different materials. We have across the bottom, just like we have in our first column, and our laid out into columns. The awesome thing about charts is that it makes all of it very. So we can look down this column and kind of pick out some things and see that flooring is cost, cabinets are next. If we look around, we'll see that the fridge is the next expensive thing. Or we can create a chart like this and we can really easily see that our flooring is the most expensive thing, that our cabinets are the second, and that our fridge is the third. And so this is a column chart, which I'll show you how to do. Pie chart. It's just a circle that's divided into segments representing each of the materials in our chart. So all of our materials here are represented around the outside, and in this case, instead of having the cost of different ones listed in percentages of the total cost for each one. So again, we can see that our flooring is 41% of the entire cost of the remodel. And then when we go over to paint, we can see that it's only 20%. This gives you a really great visual breakdown of your costs. Finally, we have essentially the same chart as this first, but this one is set up as a bar chart, so our data is represented horizontally. And the nice thing about a bar chart is it makes it even more clear the differences in any value. So you can see how flooring really stands out because this bar extends so far across the edge. As the one does still stand out, but it's not quite as dramatic as this. And you can see all the way to in the paint what each one costs and how each item relates rest of the list. So let's just start from scratch with our kitchen remodel cost worksheet, and I'll show you how to create your first chart. And probably one of the hardest things about creating charts is to represent your data. For instance, if we were to have a chart that listed our materials of each material, that might not really be that beneficial to us, because it's help you in any way to see a chart that shows you that you're going to have 24 cabin 400 square feet of flooring. On the other hand, if you want to compare costs to each other to see which parts of your project are going to be the most expensive, then comparing yourself makes a little bit more sense. So before you go to create a chart, think for a minute about what you want to represent. So in this case, we're just going to work total. And there are a couple ways that you can use the data like this. You can have a table, which we'll talk about in another part of this course, or you can the way you do that is you select the entire range that you want to work with, click bar, name your range, call it R for kitchen model, and hit enter. Then if you click off and select, you'll see that the name of your range pops up there. Or you can just select range, go to insert, and click on charts. Now you can pick from one of the drop downs here, which will give you a little preview of each chart type, or you can which will bring up a dialog box, or you can go to the recommended charts tool. Recommended charts tool, because of ideas for what it thinks will work for you. It's not very helpful, like in this instance, the quantity and cost included in this range, and so it's trying to figure out how to calculate the quantity cost, and some of these charts don't really make that much sense. But typically, if you have a kind of tight range that is relevant only to the chart information, going to the tool is generally pretty accurate and helpful. I'm just going to choose a column chart, and even though it looks kind of funny right now, we're going to change it so that it's representing the information that we want to represent. And I'm going to just click on that, and you notice when you hover it over it, it gives you a really nice close-up of it so you can see what you're getting into. But I've selected that one, and I'm going to click OK. Automatically create a chart. Now you can see once this chart is created, it's showing which thing out of my range for the different chart. So I'm going to show you how to change that. So first I'm going to shrink this down a little bit so we can get everything in here where we want it. And then I'm going to right click, go to select data. And I'll just pull up here. First we have our chart data range, referring to my whole range, which is but I don't need to calculate the quantity and the individual cost of each item. I just want higher totals of each item. Then I'm going to go ahead and go in here and the cost, and I'm going to remove those. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the rows and columns. So I actually want the total cost of my materials to be in the column. I want all of these items to be in the horizontal column, so each of them will be. So I just click this and it'll switch those back and forth. And so now I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now I can expand this to make. Now you can see we have a really clear representation of our flooring costs, our cabinet costs, and all of the different materials that we have in our spreadsheet. It gives you representing the different costs of each of your materials. And then next tools for formatting this, the colors and different elements of it to make it look good. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about the anatomy of a formula, and this is important because there are a number of different parts to each formula, which you can add or remove from a formula to change the calculation that it will do. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about 6 main pieces that you will find in formulas. plus a couple of other common elements that you'll find on a regular basis. So let's just take a look at a completed formula so we can see what it looks like. Click on that cell. You'll see equal sign. Start any formula with an equal sign. The equals is just about to enter a formula. The second part of this formula is the function. In this case, we're using the sum function, which we've already learned about. And as you recall, a function is code that adds steroids to your formula and allows you to do much more powerful calculations. Next up in this formula, we have the parentheses. Parentheses do two things. They are defining the cell reference. So these parentheses are A1 through A2 in this formula. Another thing that parentheses can do is define your order of operations. So for example, if I have a sum formula here, and I want to say 2 plus 2 times 5, if you math in there makes a difference in your equation by defining your order of operations like this, plus in parentheses times 5, you have to do in the parentheses first. So you'll do 2 plus 2 and get 4, and then you'll take 4 times 5 and you'll get 20. So if we go back into this equation and we move this parentheses here, it now changes the order of operations because you have to do the multiplication or the addition unless parentheses define it differently. So you do 2 times 5 and get 10, then you add the 2 and get 12. And you'll see if I hit enter, that's what we have. So in this above equation, we have 2 plus 2, then times 5 is 20. And in this equation, because we've moved the parentheses outside, we have 2 times 5 is 10, plus 2 is 12. So that's what parentheses do. They modify operations. Back common use of parentheses is that they define cell references. So in this case, it's defining cell reference to cells A1, A2. If you didn't have parentheses here, you would get an error. And in fact, I can show you what it looks like. See, it gives you a name error because it doesn't understand what you're doing with parentheses. So I'll undo that to fix it. So that's what the parentheses. And speaking of cell references, that brings me to the next one, number 4, which we've basically already talked about, but it is your cell reference. And your cell reference is for your calculations. Another name for a cell reference is a function argument, and I'll show you what I mean by that. If we go back here and we click on the sum function from here, it's going to bring up our arguments. Your function argument is the data that you're referring to that you want Excel to use in your formula. And you always define your function arguments with parentheses. And in fact, you can see Excel is doing it automatically for me here. So that function, the fifth part of our equation here. And let me go back to our original formula. The fifth part of our equation is an operator. And you might remember operators are plus, minus, divide, multiple. Common operators, there are also greater than, less than. You can use less than symbols together, which means does not equal, or you can use the equators, which you probably recall from math as well. And the next is number 6 is constants, and constants is a number or text in your formula that does not change. So that's our 2 in this equation, as opposed to where I could go into this cell and I could change the number and it would change the answer. But a constant will always stay the same. So number 2, and it will always be that way in the formula. So those parts are, there are a few other elements that you will use from time to time. The most probably quotation marks, which defines text within your formula, commas, which would be used in your cell references, and we've talked about that when you do A1 colon A2, it means A1 through A2. So you're picking an entire range of cells. When you use a comma, you are referring to A1 and A2. So you're really just defining two cells. And it lists of cells like this. You could say A1, A2, and D1. So that's what you use the comma for. And then, of course, colon, you use the range. So if I wanted to do A1 through E1, we can select it like that. Excel will automatically enter in the colon to give us the full range of these numbers. So that's the anatomy of a formula. We learned about the equal sign, the function, the parentheses range, and your order of operations, the cell reference or the cell argument, the use of operators, the addition of a constant, which is a number or text in your formula that doesn't change, and then quotations, commas, and colons, which are some other common elements that are used. So that should help you to understand better, but to be able to troubleshoot them, modify them, and to do the calculations that you want to do in your spreadsheets. Okay, in this lecture we're going to be talking about new features for Excel 2016. There's quite a handful of them, and some of them are really fun, so I want to show you briefly how a couple of them work, and then I'm going to parts of this course. So the first thing I'll show you is called Make a Simple Word. Like we click on it, we get this option called Smart Lookup. If we click on Smart Lookup, over to the right here, it'll actually search the internet and bring you back results from the internet. So you can see we have a simple definition of it. We have a Wikipedia entry, more images. It's always been my opinion that this is much more valuable in Word, where you're actually doing more research-based things, but it's still awesome to have it here with the window. Another new feature is the Get and Transform tab here to manage how you bring information such as into your Excel to work on them. So the way you use that is you just go to New Query, and then for example you can go to From File, and I'm just going to go grab some data from this work. So I can just select the document I want, and I just want to grab this, and in this case there's only one individual sheets. So I'm going to click Sheet 1, and then I can click Load. You can see that it pops into my workbook, a new worksheet, and applies some base. And you also have another pane here that and some detail out. So we can go back to the Data tab. We can turn the Queries pane off or turn it back on, where you can see your recent sources, which just shows where you've done a recent query. So that's the Get and Transform feature. And then we have Inc equation, and if you go to the Insert tab and then way down to the right here, equation, you click the drop down. It gives you the options to insert popular here where it says Inc equation at the bottom. Click that, and you can write in your own equation. So I'd say doing this with the mouse, by the way. So it's going to change erase, rewrite. So if I squared, you click insert, and it will allow you to drop it right into your page. So that's a cool one. We also have a share button, which is right here, and you just click on that, and it brings up a share pane. And you save file to cloud, and then you can include one document. You can even change whether they can edit or view the document, and then you share. I'm going to look at a couple of new features which I've created entire lectures about these really. But one of them is the Tell Me What You Want to Do button. It's basically the new function. It does have some fun options where it will give you things done. So we'll look into that one in some more detail later. There's new. If we go to Recommended Charts and go to All Charts, these new charts here. We have a tree map, a sunburst, a histogram, hiding back in behind the histogram, a parade, a box and whisker chart, waterfall. We'll go into the uses of those a bit more in a separate lecture. We have a really neat one called one-click forecasting, which is just a button on the data sheet where you click forecast sheet, and it will create a forecast of your existing time-related data. So this would be the existing data, and this is the forecasted data. So that's a really fun one to use, and I'll go into more detail on how to do that in another lecture. And then finally, we have the 3D maps, which I'll also go into in more detail in the lecture. But that's a feature found right here on the Insert tab. And you just click on that button, and it gives you these tours that you can create. And I'll show you how to create one of these tours that maps out data on an actual map. Movable. So those are some of the exciting new features for Excel 2016.